and welcome to another episode of No Such Thing as a Fish, a weekly podcast coming to you from the QI offices in Covent Garden. My name is Dan Schreiber, and I am sitting here with James Harkin, Alex Bell, and Andrew Hunter Murray. And once again, we have gathered around the microphones with our 4 favorite facts from the last 7 days, and in no particular order, here we go. Starting with you, Andy Murray.
My fact is that in 1851, all of the 436,800 sandwiches sold on the streets of London were ham.
Just ham sandwiches.
Just ham sandwiches.
That's so obviously not true.
It can't be true.
Well, I think it is.
Was it just ham, or did they have like ham and pickle or ham and mustard? Or
Add some mustard.
okay,
Had other sandwiches been invented at that point and they thought, we
Yeah.
don't actually like those, we'll stick with ham?
I think they have, because I think they had cheese sandwiches, because we've said before on this podcast they used to be called bread and meat or bread and cheese.
yeah.
So I'll tell you, basically, ham sandwiching was a thing, as in you didn't have a sandwich shop. You would be a sandwich seller, and you would have your own ham, and you would boil it, and then you would sell it from your cart. So it's quite hard to have a big range. And we only know about this because there was a guy called Henry Mayhew, who was a social investigator, and he wrote this huge work called London Labour and the London Poor. And he calculated that number of sandwiches were sold, and the only ones he came across were ham ones. So
He's pretty amazing, this guy.
He is.
I hadn't heard of him. He co-founded Punch, which was the original British satirical magazine that ran for, hundreds of years.
So might this have been satire we're talking about?
no, it's not. And Bea Wilson, who's a food writer, and her book's very good. She also has written an essay on the subject, and she said that all the sandwiches were ham.
If Bea Wilson says it, then I do believe it.
But even before he went and did Punch, he had the most ridiculous childhood. He ran away from home when he was 12 to join the East India Company
Wow.
and worked on their ships. And then he came back and tried law, and then he went into journalism. But 12, he ran away when he was 12.
But you know how people used to die younger? Is it like dog years? Is 12 actually like 18 back then?
Well, I guess kind of, but also he ran away because he didn't want to follow the same career as his father. So it's a pretty early age.
What did his father do?
He was a sailor.
I think he was an accountant.
Oh, well, I can understand that.
He was a
That's
very
true.
fertile accountant, because Henry Mayhew was one of 17 children.
Was he?
17!
Wow.
He did report on his sandwich investigation that one seller told him that sometimes cab drivers would offer to fight them for a sandwich instead of paying for it.
Oh, that doesn't really feel like it would be a good idea.
Well, it doesn't work in Pret when I try it.
No, because as a sandwich seller, the best outcome is that you've won a fight.
Yeah, and kept a sandwich. But you've had to fight someone not to lose a sandwich.
Yeah, exactly.
So if
It feels like it would be better for you to do nothing at all than to get involved in this fight.
Yeah, say no transaction.
Yeah.
This isn't the best ham-based story from 1851, I have to say.
It was a good year, wasn't it?
It was
for,
a very,
we
very
should say what
strong
else
year.
happened in 1851. Just give it some
Yeah,
context.
sure,
The Great
okay.
Exhibition happened in London.
and it was
Wow.
just ham sandwiches on the way.
Sandwiches. Well, didn't they have tinned food as one of the attractions? So I guess ham may have been.
Ah.
And also, Moby Dick was published.
I've got to say the best Moby Dick fact ever, which we
Yeah.
all know because it was found by one of our colleagues, Ed Brooke Hitchens, this last week, which is that he got a rejection letter from one publisher saying the whale is obviously a nice idea, but maybe you could replace it by something more popular, maybe young voluptuous maidens.
Why would you want to harpoon young voluptuous maidens?
That's true.
Doesn't make any sense.
It would have been like Carrie. It would have just been a horror novel.
Hang on, Dan. You said you had a better ham anecdote from 1851.
Yeah, well, okay, Alex.
Anecdote.
We all did it in our heads, James, and we all decided not to say it.
That's not how podcasts work now.
Yeah, so other news, Alex mentions the Great Exhibition, Moby Dick. 2 other things that happened in 1851 is that the New York Times was founded and Reuters News was founded as well. So obviously a lot more outlet to report ham-based stories were erupting that year. So Christmas in 1851, have you heard about this? In London, it was a sort of super great giveaway to all the poor of London to feed them on Christmas Day. And it was over 22,000 people who were fed in one single place. And that place was called Ham Yard. And Ham Yard in London, they had benefactors from all the richest people in London who gave one guy called Mr. Richard Cooper supplied 200 pounds of beef. And they did a massive Christmas meal for all the less privileged of London. So over 22,000 people fed in one go by a very famous chef. He's often called the first celebrity chef, Alexis Soyer. and it was his idea, and he put it together, and he fed all these people.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've been to Ham Yard. It's off Regent Street.
Yes, still there, right?
It's still there.
Yeah.
The best ham sandwich related story of the mid 19th century.
Okay, that's cheating a bit.
Well, it is. This comes from around 1840, so it's about 10 years before both of your ham sandwich
Oh,
stories.
this is way better then. If you've got predated.
It's true. So the town of Swindon was invented by a ham sandwich.
What?
It was founded by a ham sandwich, let's say. The story goes, I don't know if this is true, that Isambard Kingdom Brunel was on the railway and he knew that they had to found a town somewhere on the railway because they needed to have a stop there. And he started eating his ham sandwich, and then he thought, well, as soon as I've had enough of this sandwich and I throw it out the window, wherever it lands, that's where I'm going to start my new town. And it landed where currently Swindon is.
No way.
But hang on. Because you'd have to stop the train immediately
Yeah,
and go back and find the
and go
ham
back and find the
sandwich.
sandwich.
that is true. Unless you remembered.
Oh, we were
kind
passing
of
through
area.
Swindon when I threw my sandwich out of the window.
I threw my sandwich out right next to that sign that says "Welcome to Swindon."
But Swindon was tiny. It was absolutely
Yeah.
tiny before the railway arrived, and then it became huge. So there's another town that's sort of further south in Wiltshire called Marlborough, and it's absolutely tiny. But it could as easily have gone the other way if Isambard Kingdom Brunel had, been a bit hungry or hadn't had a banana at breakfast and he wanted a bit more of his sandwich.
So ham sandwiches are still extremely popular.
Are they?
Yeah,
yeah.
The British Sandwich Association says that ham sandwiches is the most popular sandwich in the UK.
Really? Do you think they'll look back in 100 years at 2016 and think it was a great age of ham sandwiches as well?
I think finally back to the great times of 1851. So this is an old survey. I can't imagine though. It was 2001. I can't imagine in 15 years it's changed that much. But they said that the favorite filling wasn't ham though. It was cheese, but a ham sandwich on its own topped.
But the favourite filling?
Yeah.
I always like my ham sandwiches without ham, but with cheese.
I think what they mean is, what's your favorite filling? Well, if I'm having a sandwich, I love it if there's cheese in there. And they said, would you be happy with just a cheese sandwich? No, I think I'll go for ham. I think that's how the conversation
Wait,
went.
but the favourite filling, is that because you have it outside the sandwich?
No, you have it in the sandwich, but you might have it with ham. So you have a ham and cheese sandwich.
So you're saying ham is not a filling because it's the base ingredient of the sandwich, and
No.
therefore anything extra is a filling?
No, there's two questions. One is there's bread and an item in it,
Yeah.
and you could have one item in it. They've gone for ham sandwich. That works best as a sandwich.
Yeah.
What's your favorite filling to go in a sandwich? Oh, okay. Well, if I'm having a ham sandwich, rather than pickle, I'll have cheese.
But
But
what's
cheese
your-
is the favorite added
But
on.
what's your favourite filling for 2 slices of bread? Is ham.
Yeah.
Of all the things that people have voted on in 2016, this makes me the most annoyed.
Well, this is 2001. People say
All right.
2016
Done.
to shit you. Imagine you were presented with a lot of different sandwiches that had base meats in them. Like let's say, or no meats, or like a salad or whatever.
Base meat. Like the alchemy of the sandwich world.
There's base 10, which are number systems, and then base meat, which is what our sandwiches are based on.
Turned ham into cheese.
2/3 of ham and cheese pizzas tested by trading standards officers in Derbyshire fail to contain ham or cheese.
No.
Yeah.
How many?
2/3.
2/3 of the pizza.
Oh my god! What it was is when people thought it was ham, it was actually turkey ham, which is made of turkey, not ham, and the cheese was often cheese substitute. I'm not sure what cheese substitute is, but it doesn't sound great.
Well,
does
ham, apparently.
So Henry Mayhew did a load of, just to drag us back to Henry Mayhew for a bit, he did a load of calculations, basically. So he calculated how many sellers there were of each thing on the streets of London. So he calculated, for example, that there were 60 ham sandwich sellers in London, 200 baked potato sellers, 300 people who sell pea soup and hot eel. 6 people apparently specialised in plum puddings.
they?
Yeah. And he would work it out by estimating the number of miles of street in the city and then multiplying that by the number of traders he found per mile. Yeah.
I think it sounds like the most fascinating book. I really want to read it. What's it called again? It's called
London Labour and the London Poor.
Yeah, and he basically documented 1851 in London, down to every bit of clothing that people. It would be like us just going out on the street and just recording what's going on as a time capsule, and it's pretty amazing work.
Incredibly comprehensive.
Really, yeah, and it
That's
had a
cool.
big impact. He pissed off a lot of people with this book, particularly the street traders, and they actually set up a Street Traders Protection Association against this kind of journalism, specifically
Right.
because how they were presented in the book.
They were presented like these sandwich sellers. They're like, well, actually, we do have a bit more than ham. Actually,
Yeah, exactly.
really?
Yeah.
Some of the sandwiches didn't even have ham in.
Did they not?
No.
Just cheese.
They had a bit of they had a bit of beef dripping, and that was it between two bits of
Okay.
bread.
What is beef dripping?
It's
That's-
fat.
Yeah.
Sort of.
It's a congealed fat. When you've cooked
yeah.
beef, you get all the fat kind of drops down when you roast it, and then you can take that and you can kind of spread it on bread, and it's what people used to eat.
That sounds like cheese substitute.
It does, but it doesn't taste anything like cheese. It tastes more like kind of fatty gravy.
Oh, so delicious. Also, he collected a load of data with his brother, Augustus Mayhew, and yet, 20 years after the book was published, Augustus Mayhew was had up in court on charges of attacking a female peddler, a woman going around selling things.
Really?
And his defense in court was that people would knock on his door up to 38 times a day selling things. And he just snapped, and he said they were shouting things like crockery or fine young rabbits or roots all are blowing, all are growing.
Fine Young Rabbits sounds like a great band, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Did you know that there's a latitude around the Earth that's sometimes referred to as the ham belt, and it's 40 degrees latitude, and it's it's not so much these days, but it used to be the climate at which all the best ham came from. So, like Kentucky ham, Virginia ham, Italian prosciutto ham, Spanish Serrano ham, all of those places are along the same latitude, and it's because the climate is sort of ideal for ham curing, and it's not so important nowadays because you have climate control factories and whatnot. But yeah,
And it was
That's
discovered by Alexander von Humboldt.
Okay, it is time for fact number 2, and that is Alex.
my fact is that since 2003, the UK has eaten £1.5 million in cash.
Okay.
And when you say cash, are we talking 2p coins or?
Notes.
Oh.
So this is the Bank of England releases stats every year on the the graph.
Alex got a massive graph on his research notes here.
So for people at home, what happens is we kind of do some research and we print it out on a sheet of paper, and we've got like little paragraphs that we might read out if something comes up. But Alex just has a massive graph.
I'm concerned by the year-to-year trend. I'm going to explain. You can submit banknotes that are damaged in some way to the Bank of England to get them replaced.
Okay.
And then they keep stats on them. So they release each year how many banknotes have been torn apart or accidentally washed or contaminated or damaged by fire or flood. And the other category is chewed or eaten.
Okay.
And so each year they've released how many notes of each denomination have been chewed or eaten and how much they're worth. And in total, since 2003, it's 1.5 million.
Okay, so I reckon when you said that fact, people were thinking that humans were eating these notes, but I reckon it must be mostly like dogs and stuff.
Maybe,
right?
yeah.
It could be babies.
Could be babies.
Yeah, I mean, babies will put things in their mouths, won't they?
They will, but they don't have teeth,
That's true.
so they won't be chewing it and damaging it. I mean, some of them have teeth, don't they?
Do you have to have teeth to chew?
That's a good point.
Can you chew with gums alone?
You could ruminate the note in your mouth.
you
and
could,
then swallow
yeah,
like a
you could
cow.
dissolve it.
Yeah.
I'd say a baby would be sucking rather than chewing.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
But you have to provide the remnants of the note to prove that you had it in the first place, because otherwise you could just write to back and say.
But how do you?
it's
So what?
good.
You bring the dog?
So
Like,
you bring the
If you've
leftovers, I
eaten-
guess. So there could be plenty of notes that have been completely eaten, I guess.
it's very hard to say. My dog ate 2,000 quid in £50 notes. Unfortunately, he ate them so thoroughly.
Yeah.
But if you could send me, no, but they do send those. I recommended it.
Yeah.
It's called the Mutilated Notes Service, and you post them in and you write a little explaining letter. And if they think it's legit, then I'll post you some money.
Ah,
Yeah.
I could have used that. I once got given an envelope of some money, and
You've been paid it for asking those questions in the House of Commons, haven't you?
Excellent satire from the early 2000s.
Thank you. It's 90s, actually. That's yeah. And the rest of you can look that up at home and have a really entertaining afternoon. Cash for questions. Anyway, sorry, go on. Go on, Dan.
So rather than opening the envelope the normal way, I opened it up at the top end on the side. So I just ripped it open.
The short edge of the envelope.
Yes, exactly. So I ripped it open there, and then I got to the shop and it was closed, and so I couldn't buy anything. So I went to my house, came out in the morning to buy the milk that I was looking to buy, handed over from the envelope my £10 note, and the guy said, "I can't accept this. You're missing the last eighth of the note." And what I had done, and there was about 60 quid in this envelope, I had ripped, as well as the envelope, all that final eighth of all the notes. And they had scattered all on the street, and I had to go around the street collecting the rest of my notes.
You got them back?
Yeah, I found them. They were
The
all
day afterwards.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah,
my
yeah, the
god.
next morning.
Did you get the milk?
I did. Yeah.
Great.
I think that all of these banknotes were mostly eaten by dogs, not humans or babies. Well, babies are humans, apart from baby dogs. So I think they're mostly eaten by dogs. In Montana, a few years ago, there was a news story about a dog called Sundance who ate 5 $100 bills that were stashed in his owner's little cubby hole. But the $500 bills were together with a single $1 bill, which it didn't eat.
That's fantastic.
Wow. This is interesting. Do you know where the first place to feature Queen Elizabeth on money was?
So not Britain,
It was not Britain. Yeah.
Was it? Oh,
Somewhere in the Caribbean.
No.
somewhere in Africa.
No.
Australia?
No.
Canada?
Yes.
Yeah. Why is that?
They had her when she was a 9-year-old princess, so prior to being the queen, and it was on their $20 notes. And so obviously she wasn't on any money here; she wasn't the queen yet. But they wanted to give her some props over there. I'm not sure completely why, but they used her image. Yeah,
That's cool.
Speaking of notes in Canada, a few years ago there was a rumor that all Canadian banknotes smelled of maple syrup, and people were kind of pulling them out of their pockets and smelling them and believed that they could smell maple syrup. And everyone on the internet was saying, yeah, mine smell of maple syrup as well. Mine only smell of it when I take them out of my pocket and they've warmed up. So they must be putting something in the note.
And I keep the pocket I keep all my maple syrup in. Yeah.
Well, I think that must have been it, or it was just like a weird hysteria because the Bank of Canada said that actually there's nothing in there and we've tested ours and they don't smell of maple syrup.
But they have got in trouble in the past as well, the Bank of Canada, because they did a new series of banknotes and they put a maple leaf on, and it was pointed out that that maple leaf, that particular shape of maple leaf, is from a tree which does not grow in Canada.
That's right. It was a Norwegian maple rather than a Canadian maple.
Right.
wasn't it?
And they said, actually, what we've done is we've blended together a load of maple leaves to avoid being regionally insensitive.
To all those
no way.
Norwegians living in Canada.
That's kind of like the euro, though, because
Yeah.
when they designed the euro notes, they didn't want to favour any particular country's culture, so they got someone to take a load of famous bridges from all the different countries that were taking the euro and sort of blend them into generic bridges. That
Yeah,
were
so
made
all
up
the
of composite
euro
bridges.
money has fake bridges on it,
Yeah.
so no one gets
then
offended.
An artist started building those bridges. It was an art installation rather than an actual bridge, but he started building the fake bridges over rivers in Belgium or something.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
sort of like odd, weird reverse forgery, but not money.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a cool thing about currency. So in, I think it was November or October, the Japanese financial services industry was considering regulating a new kind of currency, which was, any guesses? It's a currency that James spends and the rest of us don't.
Pokemon money?
It's Pokecoins. So as far as I understand, you use the currency to breed imaginary monsters on your phone.
You use them to not buy monsters, but buy things that help you to find monsters.
I see. Okay.
Wait, so you can't even buy Pokemon with them. You can buy facilities
No.
to help you.
Well, you got to catch Pokemon.
Yeah,
So it's like you can buy a net with a Pokecoin.
kind of. You
And
can buy a lure.
That's spending real money on that.
You can spend real money, or you can find them in the game.
Okay. So
But we all do it, like Temple Run, when you spend money to buy more, speed ability and so on.
okay,
We all
well,
do it, Andy.
We all do it.
Okay. The Japanese Financial Services Authority is not considering regulating Temple Run coins, though. They are considering
The
regulating.
Mayan.
And basically, if they did decide to regulate it, I'm not sure if they've come to a conclusion yet. Companies would have to declare all the unused currency that gamers have held, and they'd have to secure it with massive deposits of real money.
Wow.
Really
Actually,
interesting.
Yeah.
Speaking of digital money, there's a landfill in Wales which has an enormous treasure trove like buried treasure, and it's getting more and more valuable each year. So in 2013, it was worth £4 million, and it's because there's a hard drive which a man called James Howells threw away in 2013, and he realized after he'd thrown it away that he had a digital wallet on it which had 7,500 Bitcoin, and he got those in 2009 when they were worth nothing. But they now worth 2013 they're worth about £4 million, and they're increasing a lot more since then.
And so we don't know where it is in
somewhere under there, yeah. And
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, get digging.
Should we move on soon?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I have one thing that Motorola has invented an edible password. They call it an authentication vitamin, and it's a pill that you swallow, and if you have your phone near you, it will wirelessly unlock it.
Sorry, I'm a bit confused on how
Yeah.
it works. So you swallow a pill?
You swallow a pill. It has a tiny microchip in it, which broadcasts a little signal, and that's a signal that will wirelessly unlock your devices if they're set up for it.
So is it activated by the act of swallowing it?
No, you don't have to swallow it every time you're on your phone. You put it in you, and then whenever you're around your phone, it's unlocked.
But except for when you poo it out.
Yeah, so then you have to swallow another one.
But why can't you just have it in your pocket?
Because you could lose that, or someone else could that's a
Pickpocket
really
you?
good point.
Yeah.
Whereas you can't have it stolen from you if you've eaten it.
So what you could do is you could put the little chip that's in an Oyster card, and you could eat that, and then every time you're walking towards the gates at the tube station, it'll be like you're on Star Wars or something.
Yeah, and that is why, my lord, I took a dump on the oyster barrier.
Okay, it is time to move on to fact number 3, and that is my fact. And my fact this week is that a day on the sun lasts both 25 and 38 Earth days.
Okay, you're going to have to explain, because it's always going to feel like daytime there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not really gonna. Yeah, you're gonna be confused. So, because it's a massive gas body, it spins at different speeds. So the middle of it, the equator, as it were, spins around 25 days. That makes 1 day. But the poles go a lot slower, so it takes up to 38 days for them to turn around. So I should say that there are fluctuations in these numbers, obviously. So 24.7 is usually the number given for the quickest bit, where the equator, where the middle of the sun is spinning around. 38 is the top end bit. But I asked Alex, and I saw an astrophysicist the other night, Dr. Lucy Green, and she said that's absolutely true, that they do have these different spins on them. Yeah, really interesting.
So do Jupiter and Saturn, actually. They also have differential spin because they're gas. Yeah.
I found out this thing the other day, which I told the guys, but I haven't told you yet, so I'll ask you as a question.
Go on.
So let's assume that there are 8 planets in the solar system.
Yeah.
How many planets in our solar system orbit the sun?
Of those 8, all of them.
Technically, if you go into a super technical reasoning, we orbit the sun because the center of the gravity that's pulling us, making us orbit the sun, is in the middle of the sun. Jupiter is so large, it's so big, that it's pulled the center of gravity out to above the sun's surface. So technically, they are orbiting each other.
That's really good.
Yeah, it's quite cool, isn't it? I had no idea Jupiter was that big.
It also has a massively fast day, Jupiter.
Does it?
So, yeah, it rotates every 10 hours. So daytime and nighttime each last about 5 Earth hours, which is really short. It's faster than any other planet. And if it was 80 times larger, which is not that much larger, it could have been a star, Jupiter.
Wow.
Yeah.
What would it have done to us?
Oh, I think we'd be in big trouble.
Yeah, issues, right?
Probably.
Hey, so I found this fact when I was reading a book called The Jupiter Effect, which is written by John Gribben, who most people know is a massive popular science writer. He wrote In Search of Schrodinger's Cat. And this book is the one book that he wants people to forget about. So I apologize
I'm
to
glad,
John Gribben.
because you've met John Gribben, haven't you?
I have, yeah.
He'll be delighted that you're bringing this up.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, but it is out there, and it's a really well-written book, except for one thing, which it has a conceit of it, which is that basically there was going to be a ginormous earthquake at the San Andreas Fault on March the 10th of 1982, because they believed that all the planets were going to align, and it was just going to set off chaos on Earth, which never happened. It was a bestseller, though, but it didn't happen, and so he's kind of buried that book by writing about 200 more books to separate
That's
himself.
true. He writes tons of books, and they're all brilliant.
They're
by
all
the way.
brilliant, yeah.
But yeah, do you think that's the reason he writes so many?
I think just so it goes
cover it
further
up,
down that bibliography list.
Yeah.
Just going back to the sun very quickly.
Yes.
What would happen if you replaced the sun with a black hole?
So there'd be less light,
Yeah.
for
Yes.
starters.
There'd be less energy coming from it, you would think.
Yes.
So it'd all freeze to death.
And we would get sucked into it.
No, there we are.
There
That's
we go.
finally the thing. Yeah, no, apparently, so the Oxford University Science blog looked into this, and they found that apparently the planet's orbits would stay kind of much the same, because if it's the same mass as the sun, this black hole, then the gravitational field it produces is about the same as that of the sun. But it will be cold and dark.
The sun is obviously emitting loads of heat, but Jupiter, we're talking about Jupiter irradiates so much heat that it loses it faster than it gains energy from the sun, which means that it's shrinking at about 2 centimeters a year.
That is huge.
What?
Yeah.
2 centimeters a year?
Yeah, I mean, it's massive, so that's relatively quite small amount, but that's mad. Yeah.
Are there planets out there that we've seen exoplanet style that would be just enough atmosphere, tall enough that a 6-foot person could stand in and sort of like run their life, but that's where the planet ends?
Well, that's the only atmosphere.
Yeah, so if you were to go to, I think it's Mars,
Yeah.
they have a very, very, very weak atmosphere. And so it would kind of feel like winter at your head, but spring at your feet.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
So you kind of, your head would be out of the atmosphere, kind of.
So you have to. What do you have to? Where do you spend Christmas? Do you have to go up a stepladder basically for
Yeah.
Christmas, and then for
Some
spring,
just lie on the floor.
summer collection, just lie down?
I have one more. Do you know what else is fueled by the sun? Superman, according to DC Comics.
Really?
We know this because once he was bitten by Dracula and Dracula exploded.
What?
Science, guys.
I don't recall that bit of the Bram Stoker novel. Wait, hang on. Dracula bites Superman, and then Superman explodes.
No,
Dracula explodes because vampires don't like sunlight.
How do we know Superman isn't made out of garlic?
okay, it is time for a final fact of the show, and that is James.
Okay, my fact this week is that in 1945, police in Halifax, Nova Scotia, initiated a campaign to stop people from beeping their car horns in Morse code to signal out vile and filthy language.
And what were they saying in the Morse code? Do we know?
This is the weird thing, right? So I saw this on a website called Boing Boing, which is one of my favorite places online. They have amazing facts and stuff like that on there. And it was a news cutting. And I'm pretty sure the news cutting is real because I found it in other places. But that's the only thing on the whole of the internet that seems to give any idea that this actually happened.
Now I see why you were throwing shade at my ham sandwiches fact. You were trying to draw attention from your own sketchy sourcing.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't know if it's true. If anyone knows any more, then do let us know. But I think it's a nice idea if it's not true, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's the most eloquent way to swear at someone through Morse code. It takes a long time.
It takes a very long time.
Beep, 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 beep. Oh, you're a dick, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're in traffic, though, you do have time. So you might as well
That's
send a
true.
message.
Yeah.
You're relying on the person who is a dick knowing Morse code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite funny because it does sound like you're actually just bleeping yourself
Yeah.
as you're swearing at someone. So this is 1945.
That's right.
What kind of car horns were we at that point? What kind of cars were we at that point?
Well, we will have had cars that are not a million miles dissimilar to cars that we have now. They're combustion engines.
So maybe slightly bigger American cars, that kind of
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah, so the 50s is where I start to sort
Yeah.
of clock what a car is.
Okay, so imagine 5 years before that.
Take off the tail fins, yeah.
got it there.
But they've had horns, like a horn sound, since the very beginning of things with wheels on the road, haven't they? And
Yeah,
they-
so they predate cars.
Yeah, and they were originally outside the cars, and people would like walk alongside carriages with horns, or they'd walk alongside cars with horns.
What
And
did
then
if you were just
took them-
walking, you had a horn?
Yes,
I don't know.
I've read this as well. That
Yeah.
pedestrians carried the first car horns to warn cars, and then eventually they said, "Why don't we combine this with the car?"
I read that there was an early locomotive act, and the idea was that cars used to travel really slowly, and to warn people that cars were on the way, someone would walk ahead of the car with a red flag.
Okay, so Andy
Yeah.
knows everything about this.
Yeah, is it true? Is this true?
Not really.
Oh, okay.
It's
Well-
true that the act existed.
The act existed,
Yep.
and the red flag thing was used, and you would have to have 3 people operating a vehicle: one to steer it, one to stoke the boiler, and one to walk ahead, who was called the stalker with the red flag.
Yep.
However, I think that when the act was introduced, cars were not a thing, because it was in about the 1870s, and by the time people started having personal cars, the red flag bit was not observed and had been repealed.
Okay.
Forgotten.
From memory, yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
how it went. So yeah,
I was looking online about sometimes in Morse code, you know, how on text messages, you know, lol for laugh out loud, there's a long list of how they do abbreviations for longer sentences. So one of my favorite ones, and this is goodbye. So I want to see who gets this. If you were doing a shortened Morse code of goodbye, it's DSW. Why would it be DSW?
Don't, darling.
What? No, DSW. Oh,
Yeah,
you were
does it
doing all
stand
the
for
Ds there.
Does it stand for 3 words?
No, it doesn't actually.
Oh, then I'm not going to know it.
DSW. I would have gone for CU because that would be shorter.
Yes, it would have been. Yeah.
So what's DSW?
DSW, I can't actually pronounce it, but James will be able to because it's his second
Dos
language.
Vidania.
Yeah.
Ah,
Isn't
yeah.
that interesting?
Ah,
It's
Yeah,
Russian.
Russian Dos Vidania.
Yeah.
I see.
That's for goodbye. DSW, goodbye. And then humor is HI, humor intended. HEE is humor intended or laughter.
We should absolutely start using these after some of our jokes on the show. I could just say HI after one of my puns.
Here's another thing I hadn't heard of. Hogmorse. Have you heard of Hogmorse?
Hogwarts, yeah, it's from.
Hogmorse.
Is it bad Morse?
Is it like Pig
Yeah,
Latin?
it's autocorrect. It's basically autocorrect for when you're doing Morse. It's the most commonly made mistakes when you're doing Morse code.
What does it mean? Is it like letters which are similar, or?
Yeah, it's basically called after one example, home becoming hog. One example given in the literature is please fill me in, becoming 6 Naz Fimi Q.
I see. So
you-
ME is going to be dash dash dot or something, but then G is going to be dash dash dot without a space.
Yes, yeah.
And so.
And I guess there's a risk of everything going really out of kilter if you mix up something and then you get out of sync with the person receiving and they think your letters end and start in different places
Right.
and then it just turns into gobbledygook.
Yeah.
So this whole fact's about a kind of secret message being sent out, basically. It's a rude secret message.
Yes.
So I found another example of this kind of thing. Another thing from the Second World War. So Chinese engravers who are designing banknotes changed the design of Chinese banknotes to score points off the Japanese who are occupying their country.
Did they?
Yeah. So, for example, the one yuan note, very, very common note, it has a picture of Confucius on it, and he's making a gesture of prayer, almost, it looks quite Buddhist almost. And some engravers changed some of the banknotes they made so that Confucius is doing the classic sex mime where you use one... your thumb and finger on one hand and the finger on the other.
And for people at home, Andy is doing said mime.
Yeah.
Great radio.
Classic sex mime, as he put it.
Yeah, so they did that.
Here's a thing about signalling out vile and filthy language. An article from the Daily Mail from a couple of years ago. Mother Lauren Walker had endured a day from hell at the hands of her son Max. The 2-year-old had smeared their dog in butter and put jam in the DVD player. Then he decided he didn't want the fish pie she had spent 2 hours making. So she then spelt out the C word in his alphabet potato shapes in revenge. I don't know how that becomes news, but it did make me laugh.
It must be a photo on Instagram that then gets
Yeah,
picked
it
up or
must
something like that.
Yeah.
I was
It's fake.
I was reading about and President Andrew Jackson. He had a parrot that he taught to swear, and apparently it attended his funeral and started swearing really loudly at his funeral and had to be taken out.
Taken out,
By the Secret Service.
Bit harsh. They'll just open up the coffin and chuck it in with him.
There is an online service called eggplantmail.com. Where you can send a message to your loved one. And the idea is that in emojis, a aubergine is a signal for something sexual. And this company will send a real-life aubergine to your loved one, and they'll inscribe a message on it. And it's supposed to be a signal. It's like doing a real-life emoji.
That's quite cool. Yeah.
Quite cool.
It's quite good, isn't it?
Yeah.
They describe themselves as 100% phallic, 100% anonymous, and 100% disturbing.
Ah. And 100% bad at maths. Okay, that's it. That's all of our facts. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to get in contact with any of us about the things that we have said over the course of this podcast, we can be found on our Twitter accounts. I'm on @Schreiberland, James,
At egg-shaped.
Andy,
At Andrew Hunter M.
and Alex.
At AlexBell_.
Yep, or you can go to our group account, which is @QI Podcast, or you can go to nosuchthing.com, which has all of our previous episodes, and you can also go to No Such Thing as the News, which has all of our previous TV show episodes, a topical look at the week.
At which week?
all the previous weeks.
All the old weeks.
If you were really thinking to yourself, I'd love to know what happened in November and late October of this year, head to nosuchthingathenews.com. We'll be back again next week with another episode. We'll see you then. Goodbye.